Thank you for joining us at the Zero Waste Asia Newsroom. This is Sonia Astudillo, GAIA Global Climate Communications Officer, reporting as we track the latest development from the fifth session of the Intergovernmental Negotiations for the Global Plastics Treaty in Busan, South Korea. As we enter the last day of the negotiations, one critical topic is at the forefront. How will this day end? Joining us live from Busan to share insights on this pressing issue is Arpita Bhagat, GAIA Asia Pacific Plastic Policy Officer. Hi, Arpita. How are you today?
I am excited, nervous, lots of mixed feelings, but also really, really hopeful because we have some really great things happening here.
The chair's latest non-paper outlines two potential paths for the treaty. One is ambitious and the other weaker and non-binding. What actions can civil society and ambitious member states take to ensure the stronger path prevails?
Yeah, so we haven't spoken in 2 days, it seems. I'm just going to back up a little bit. The last time we spoke was, I think, Friday noon, when we were still waiting for the non-paper new draft based on the synthesis report of co-chairs from the contact groups, as well as the informals that the chair said he's having. And of course, I mean, we can talk about the process issues because this is something that has concerned everyone with all of these two days of informals where civil society is not allowed and there are bilaterals happening that we don't know which countries are being consulted, which countries are not. And so far, there's a lot of misinformation, hearsay that's floating around. So that is what kept the civil society movement on its toes and trying to do our best. At the same time, so non-paper came out at around 4 p.m. on Friday, and then of course everyone tried to make sense of what it means. And we have two pathways, like you said, Sonia, especially in terms of Article 6 on supply, which is basically where we want to see production cuts happen. And option 1 is no option, so nil. And option 2 is the option which speaks to global targets, sustainable production, and has some binding language around actual plastic polymer reduction, which has been proposed by many progressive countries. So from Panama, Colombia, Ecuador, as well as African group have endorsed it. So as well as PCID submitted the same language. So when we counted, it is over 100 countries who support production reduction. And there has been a lot of momentum building with these countries actually stepping up. We've had some press conferences that I think we can talk about a little later. But so far, there is a big fight going on with petrochemical states, the likes of Saudi Arabia, Iran, as well as Russia, actually trying to block progress when we clearly have a majority of countries wanting to address plastic production, starting with the upstream, where it is the most critical. And so, that's where we are.
As you mentioned, Arpita, one of the key proposals in non-paper is the plastic production cap, with which many countries, you mentioned more than 100, are supporting. How likely it is that this will be adopted, and what impact could it have on global plastic production reduction and pollution
The
reduction?
battle is still on. And we also know that, for example, and GAIA Asia Pacific has talked about it, the need for a dedicated a new dedicated, sustainable, timely, accessible fund was something that was pushed by the African group of negotiators, which was endorsed by Fiji, Cook Islands, as well as Federated States of Micronesia, and supported by a lot of developing countries when this was discussed in Contact Group 3. At the same time, and when we counted, it is 100 plus countries that supported this dedicated finance mechanism, but it didn't show up in the chair's non-paper, which is really, really concerning. In terms of what shows up, it's actually the opposite of polluter pays. So it has language around, countries with mismanagement of plastic waste, to also contribute to this financial provision, when we know for a fact that it is the developed world that has pushed this capitalistic model of linear economy, and has done waste exports to the developing countries, especially in Asia, who need to be held accountable, who need to pay. So polluter pays is actually not coming out as strong as we would have liked. So it shifts the blame of pollution to developing countries, which is not fair at all. It is not mandatory and legally binding language. So this is, again, there is a stalemate on this. There is no mention of remediation fund that many of our countries, the Pacific Small Island developing states, as well as the archipelagic states of Indonesia and Philippines, have been demanding for, as well as money for cleanup of fishing gear that Sri Lanka called for, as well as consideration of downstream countries that receive plastic waste from neighboring countries. None of that has been accounted for. It also has room for opening door to loopholes like plastic credits, with language around blended and innovative financing, with development strategies mentioned. In terms of extended producer responsibility rules, it is very much weakly put together. It talks it uses voluntary language. It talks about EPR systems, not EPR policies or regulation. And so essentially, the financial mechanism has not taken into account the submissions, the conference room papers, which were supported by 100 plus countries, which is deeply problematic. It definitely shows to the geopolitical divide and the power of global north and their influence in the negotiations. And that's really very concerning. And that's really the fight that's ongoing here, Sonia.
With the financial mechanism being too weak to support a meaningful action, what actions can be taken to ensure that there will be adequate funding for the implementation of the treaty?
So if you remember from a few days ago, I said something on the lines of no treaty is better than a weak treaty. And that is kind of what progressive countries are echoing at this point. There has been a press conference, I believe yesterday or day before, where Panama and a bunch of other countries spoke very strongly about the need for production caps and finance. This morning also, we just concluded a press conference which had Panama, Mexico, Rwanda, EU, Fiji, talking about, why it's so critical to have production cuts in this treaty, and why they will not accept a treaty which is not strong on production reduction and upstream action. And that really is the first time that we have seen this cross-regional global set of coming together of actors. So that was very, very affirmative, positive action, and it sent a strong message out to the media, to the world, that they will not, they will keep resisting this pressure from a bunch of, like-minded group of countries who are trying to prevent a strong treaty from being materialized. They are very clear that they will keep fighting, and they also mention this coalition of the willing. If the process does not go in our favor, they're willing to walk out, which is a big sending a big message to the like-minded group of countries. So I'm sure they're paying attention, and they're aware that the ambitious countries are standing much more strongly. And Sonia, this is a big moment, and this is the last day of negotiations, and we expect to have a long day ahead and a night ahead of us as delegates from across the world whose lives, are hanging by a string. So, like I said, to somebody yesterday, it's like being on a tightrope. We can either fall here or there, and if we fall here, it's a progressive treaty. For there, we hope that it's not a weak treaty, but a no treaty. So let's see what happens. But in terms of fight, it's a strong fight. It's the first time we have high ambition coalition also really showing up and supporting. So the press conference also had EU. As well as France. France has been making some very strong statements as a country supporting production cuts. And GAIA also has a press conference which would be available on live stream at 2 p.m. local time here, which I hope that you can, our members, our media folks can watch and see that there is real progress. And so far, of course, we had yesterday, which was again a whole day of we don't know what, informals and regionals and bilaterals. We were hoping to have another version of non-paper 5. It's not out as yet, and we are expecting it sometime during the day. So far, the schedule that we see is basically more informals, some regional group meetings, as well as bureau meeting around 3 p.m. Bureau is basically, two countries, two delegates from each region are nominated and represent the region. And so it's very exclusionary. It's not including majority of countries. It's not including rights holders' voices and demands. But people are fighting for what's right. People are fighting for justice. People are fighting for fairness and a strong financial fund for justice around remediation and cleanup support as well. So right now, nothing is predictable, nothing is known until tomorrow morning. We won't know the final takeaway from this negotiations. But there is also it is also possible, I just saw that there will be likely extension of the meeting. So as I speak to you, civil society, and I'm sure delegates are trying to rebook their flights. And it's absolutely bonkers right now because this is unprecedented. This is the first INC where there's actual conversation about extension of timeline. This has not happened before. So yeah, I think it's like reaching the climax of a movie where you're nervous and you're shaking sometimes, especially of a horror movie. You don't know what's going to strike you from where, and you're trying to hold on to your inner strength, and that's what we are doing, Sonia.
What about the waste pickers, the indigenous peoples, and of course civil society? Where are they in this picture?
Well, so we are not the official delegates. We are not the ones negotiating the treaty. So we are only, trying to support the ambitious countries from the sidelines through conversation, through helping them with talking points and arguments, giving them the scientific evidence because, countries in the like-minded group do not believe that there is actual health impacts of plastic pollution, which is absolutely absurd. They have industry backed scientific evidence, which is false. We know historically, this has been a problem, and they don't believe microplastics need to be addressed. So one of the concerns in the current non-paper version that we have is how it looks at plastic waste management, which is really not good. It has a lot of weak language around non-binding language, but also it mentions energy recovery that or waste recovery that Japan has introduced. And as GAIA, we are of course against polluting technologies, and this is deeply concerning to us. It also talks about increasing collection and recycling of plastic waste without any, and there is no transparency and traceability of chemicals. So the Article 3 on chemicals of concern is again another big concern of civil society, because we know that there are 16,000 chemicals, of which only 1% are regulated, 128 chemicals to be precise. by any other international conventions, BRS, Basel, Rotterdam, and Stockholm. And we know chemicals need to be regulated as families, but there is a lot of concerns around the language of Article 3 and language of Article 7, 8, which talk about emissions as well as plastic waste management. And in terms of waste pickers, the article on just transition has addressed their concerns, but again, the language is not mandatory. It's very much about may guidance, and that's not encouraged to. That's not binding language. We need shall. We need a definitive language around targets. And so that's kind of concerning. Our members are also concerned that it does not address gender-specific needs of vulnerable communities. It has no mention of women, gender. It has no mention of Indigenous peoples. Indigenous Peoples Caucus also would have liked to see their mention in the preamble, which currently is missing, and it's not. The language needs to be stronger. In terms of language around local knowledge and Indigenous knowledge, it talks about Indigenous knowledge and local knowledge and knowledge of local communities in the same at the same level, which is problematic because we know that Indigenous knowledge, the knowledge of the First Peoples, is so much has so much historical um, um, uh, kind of nuance and historical strength to it that needs to be taken into account through special mentions. And Indigenous peoples also held their own press conference yesterday, if I'm not wrong, where we did hear some very strong statements. Our very own Matt Perriman, who is from APA in New Zealand, but also is a coordinator of the Tongva Coalition of Indigenous Peoples, made also some very strong statements, and I hope you can hear more of that pretty soon in our comms work. So essentially, what I'm saying is, Sonia, the battle is on. History is on our side. So here's what Matt said. The fact that industry can sit in decision-making rooms with governments, making decisions about our future, about our children, while actively pushing us out. The total lack of transparency that we are seeing, we are expected to be okay with. It's not okay, and we need to make sure that they understand that. So a lot of process concerns, a lot of concerns around lack of transparency and inclusion. And if we look even to the last 4 negotiating committee meetings, there haven't been informals for 2 days, and now we are looking at informals almost for 3 days. So this is a lot of informals. This is a lot of exclusion. Our regional group in Asia Pacific has never even met with civil society this time around. So we know that bad process does not lead to good outcomes, but we still have our hope on, because we have this global set of ambitious countries that have come together and are willing to fight the good fight till the very end.
Thanks, Arpita. So before we end, can we mention again these high ambition countries? We just want our audience to remember who these are, which countries they are.
Yes, so Africa Group of Negotiators, just to start with, they are absolute champions. They are unwilling to, let go of ambition. We also have champions calling for production cuts from the EU and its 27 member states. We have Panama emerging as a big hero in these negotiations with various statements. We have Australia and New Zealand from the Pacific. We have Bangladesh, our very own Bangladesh, and we have Philippines, who has also supported the statement and signed it. We have Switzerland, United Kingdom, Ukraine, Zambia, Maldives, Malawi, Madagascar, Liberia, Georgia, Ghana, Gabon, Sierra Leone, Seychelles, Senegal, and Colombia, Mexico, Cabo Verde, Antigua and Barbuda, Angola, Botswana, Canada, Republic of Central African Republic, Chad, Chile, Congo, the Ecuador, Equatorial Guinea, Eswatini, Ethiopia, uh, uh, supporting this. And of course, we also have our Pacific Small Island Developing States, 14 Pacific Small Islands Developing States, who have really come together very, very strongly this round of negotiations and are fighting the battle even as they are one of the most affected set of uh, islands, and they are keeping the battle on. And yeah, so there are a lot of countries. History is on our side. We have to be optimistic. We have to support ambition, and we have to remind the world that if there is a bad outcome, it is essentially the result of petrochemical states, like-minded group, trying to block progress, and the history will not remember them well. And it is the progressive countries and ambitious countries around the globe who have been on the right side and have fought. So, Sonia, I think there is going to be a lot of drama. We've already seen a lot of political play here. And tonight is going to be an interesting night. I can't say for sure it's going to be a decisive night because it looks like we might have to stay in Busan a little longer than we expected. So let's see. So far, we have a lot of strong statements, a lot of strong submissions, evidence that we've been trying to get to the media folks as well, so that everyone remembers who did what for the planet and its people.
Thank you so much, Arpita. All the best to tonight and the next days. Everyone, for ongoing updates on the treaty and insights from the negotiations, stay tuned to the Zero Waste Asia Newsroom and follow us on Instagram and YouTube at Zero Waste Asia and on Facebook and LinkedIn at GAIA Asia Pacific. See you next time. And don't forget, we have a press conference happening in 1.5 hours. Thank you so much.